The sun was just rising over the sleeping city when Elise hugged her husband, Thomas, one last time. Charles de Gaulle Airport was already buzzing with activity, despite the early hour. Travelers crowded around, suitcases in hand, some excited by the adventure to come, others visibly stressed by the prospect of the flight. "Are you sure it'll be okay?" Thomas asked, a hint of worry in his voice. Her blue eyes scanned Elise's face, looking for the slightest sign of doubt. Elise forced a smile. "But yes, don't worry. Enjoy your time with your mother. You both deserve it." Next to them, Margot, Thomas' mother, was stamping impatiently. At 65, it was the first time she left France, and the idea of discovering the white sand beaches and turquoise waters of Hawaii made her beam with joy. "Oh, my darling," said Margot, taking Elise's hands in hers, "I'm sorry you can't come with us. But I promise we'll send you lots of photos." Elise nodded, grateful for her mother-in-law's kindness. She wanted so much to accompany them, to feel the warm sand under her feet, to taste the exotic fruits, to let herself be lulled by the slow rhythm of island life. But duty called him here, to Paris. "Take care of yourself," she said, "and don't forget to call me when you arrive." One last kiss, one last embrace, and Thomas and Margot disappeared into the crowd of travelers. Elise stood there for a moment, with a heavy heart, before heading towards the exit. The RER journey to their apartment in the 15th arrondissement seemed endless. When she pushed open the apartment door, silence greeted her. Usually, at this time, Thomas would be making breakfast, the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. But today, and for the next 2 weeks, she would be alone. Well, not entirely alone. Elise placed her keys on the hall buffet and headed towards the guest room. She knocked gently on the door before entering. "Hello, Pierre," she said softly. "How are you feeling this morning?" Lying in bed, Pierre, Thomas's father, slowly turned his head towards her. His eyes, once bright and sparkling, now seemed dull, lost in a haze of fatigue and medication. "Ah, Elise," he whispered hoarsely. "What time is it?" "It's almost 8 o'clock," she replied, approaching the bed. "Did you sleep well?" Pierre shrugged his shoulders, a gesture that seemed to cost him considerable effort. "As usual. The nights are long when you can't move." Elise felt her heart tighten. Pierre, once so strong and full of life, had been bedridden for months, the victim of a degenerative illness that had taken everyone by surprise. That was why she had stayed in Paris, while Thomas and Margot enjoyed a well-deserved vacation. "I'll make you breakfast," she said, trying to instill some cheerfulness into her voice. "How about some toast and a good coffee?" Pierre nodded weakly, and Elise headed towards the kitchen. While preparing the tray, she couldn't help but think of Thomas and Margot, probably making themselves comfortable on the plane at this moment. She shook her head, shaking those thoughts away. She had accepted this responsibility, and she was determined to make the best of it. The days that followed settled into a quiet routine. Elise got up early, prepared breakfast for Pierre, helped him with his toilet, gave him his medicine, and spent a large part of the day by his side. She would read to him, tell him the latest news, or simply sit silently, offering her presence as silent comfort. Despite the apparent monotony of these days, Elise began to notice small details that she had never really taken the time to observe before. The way Pierre's eyes lit up when she told him about political news. How he seemed more alert and engaged when she read history books to him. And above all, she noticed that despite her physical condition, her mind remained lively and curious. One evening, as she was about to wish him good night, Pierre stopped her with a weak gesture of his hand. "Elise," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "I'd like to tell you something." Intrigued, Elise sat on the edge of the bed. "I'm listening to you, Pierre." And so began a tradition that would profoundly mark these 2 weeks. Every evening, Pierre shared with Elise stories from his youth, anecdotes about his meeting with Margot, memories of Thomas's childhood. These moments became precious to Elise, offering her a glimpse of the rich and adventurous life that Pierre had led. "You know," he said to her one evening, a nostalgic smile on his lips, "Margot and I met during a demonstration in May '68. I was a law student, she was a literature student. We found them side by side, shouting revolutionary slogans that we only half understood." Elise laughed softly, imagining a young Pierre, his hair disheveled, brandishing signs alongside an equally fiery Margot. "And how did you see each other after that?" she asked, curious. Pierre closed his eyes for a moment, as if to better remember the scene. "We lost sight of each other in the crowd. But fate, or maybe just luck, wanted us to meet up a few days later in a small bookstore in the Latin Quarter. She was looking for a book by Sartre, me one of Camus. Our hands touched when reaching the same shelf." These stories offered Elise much more than simple entertainment. They allowed her to see Pierre in a new light, no longer as the sick father-in-law she had to take care of, but as a man with a rich past, passions, dreams. She began to look forward to these moments, asking questions, laughing at amusing anecdotes, marveling at the coincidences that had marked Pierre and Margot's lives. However, as the days went by, Elise couldn't help but feel that there was something that Pierre wasn't telling her. Sometimes, in the middle of a story, he would stop abruptly, as if about to reveal a secret, before changing the subject. Other times, she caught him looking at her with an indecipherable expression, a mixture of sadness and, was it guilt? Elise was tempted to ask questions, to dig deeper, but something held her back. Perhaps it was respect for Pierre's privacy, or perhaps it was fear of breaking the fragile trust that had been established between them. The days passed, and despite Thomas' absence and the responsibility of taking care of Pierre, Elise found herself enjoying this period. She discovered a strength in herself that she never suspected, a patience and compassion that grew every day. Thomas' daily calls, filled with enthusiastic tales of the wonders of Hawaii, no longer stirred up in her the pang of jealousy she had felt at first. On the contrary, she felt happy for him, for Margot, knowing that they were fully enjoying this unique experience. One morning, while bringing Pierre breakfast, Elise was struck by a subtle change in his appearance. His eyes seemed clearer, more alert, and there was a new energy emanating from him. She put it down to a good night's sleep, but couldn't help but feel a slight uneasiness, as if she was missing something important. What Elise didn't know was that that morning marked the beginning of an unexpected turning point in their story. A turning point that would shake up not only his perception of Pierre, but also his understanding of family, loyalty, and the very nature of human relationships. As she was about to leave the room, Pierre's voice stopped her. "Elise," he said, with a firmness she hadn't heard from him in a long time, "I need to talk to you about something important." Elise turned around, intrigued and slightly worried. She couldn't have known that the words that followed would change the course of these 2 weeks, and perhaps even the rest of her life. Elise's heart was racing as she sat on the edge of Pierre's bed. The air seemed thick with palpable tension, as if the entire universe was holding its breath, waiting for the revelation to come. "What is it, Peter?" she asked softly, trying to hide the worry in her voice. Pierre took a deep breath, then, to Elise's great surprise, he sat up in bed with an ease that she had not seen in him for months. His eyes, usually dull, now shone with a mischievous glint. "Elise," he began, his voice suddenly stronger and more confident, "I have something to confess to you. I've been pretending this whole time." A deafening silence filled the room. Elise blinked, sure she had heard wrong. "Pardon," was all she could muster. Pierre chuckled, a sound that Elise had not heard in so long that it seemed almost foreign to her. "I was never as sick as I pretended to be," he explained. "At least, not lately." Elise felt the ground slip beneath her feet. Pierre's words echoed in her head, but she struggled to make sense of them. How was this possible? Why would he do such a thing? But why? She stammered, a myriad of emotions rushing through her: confusion, disbelief, and a hint of budding anger. Pierre sat up completely, sitting comfortably against the pillows. The contrast between the bedridden and weak man she had been around in recent days and the one who now stood before her was striking. "I wanted to see," he said softly, "I wanted to understand who you really were, Elise. Not just as my son's wife, but as a whole person." Elise stood up abruptly, unable to sit still. She took a few steps around the room, trying to collect her thoughts. "You mean all of this, these 2 weeks, was a test?" Anger was beginning to take over the confusion. Peter shook his head. "Not a test, Elise. An opportunity. A chance to really get to know each other, without the usual barriers, without the pre-established roles of father-in-law and daughter-in-law. Elise stopped near the window, looking without really seeing the familiar landscape of their Parisian neighborhood. The streets were beginning to come alive, people going about their daily lives, oblivious to the drama playing out in this apartment. And Thomas? Margot? Do they know? She asked, turning around to face Pierre. The old man at least had the decency to appear embarrassed. No, they don't know anything. It was my idea, and mine alone. A bitter laugh escaped Elise's lips. So you fooled them too. You fooled all of us. Pierre slowly got up from the bed, his movements still a little stiff after these weeks of forced inactivity. He approached Elise, but stopped a few steps away, respecting her need for space. I know it's hard to understand, and even harder to accept, he said softly. But please let me explain. Elise crossed her arms, her body language screaming defensiveness, but she nodded, giving him permission to continue. Pierre took a deep breath. When Thomas first introduced me to you, I knew immediately that you were special. I saw the way you looked at him, the way you listened to him. I saw an intelligent, caring, strong woman. But I wanted to know more. He paused, searching for words. You know, Elise, when we get older, we become more observant. We see things that young people don't always see. And I saw in you something rare, something that I wanted to understand and test, so to speak. Elise felt her anger fade slightly, replaced by cautious curiosity. What did you see? Loyalty, Pierre replied without hesitation. A deep loyalty, not just to Thomas, but to the very idea of family. That's something that's rare these days, you know. He approached the window, joining Elise. When the opportunity for this trip to Hawaii presented itself, I saw a chance. A chance to really get to know you, to see how deep that loyalty went. Elise shook her head, still in disbelief. But why all this drama? You could have just talked with me. Pierre gave a sad little smile. Ah, Elise. Words are easy. Anyone can say the right things. But actions, sacrifices, that's when you really see who people are. A silence settled between them, heavy with unsaid words and contradictory emotions. Elise felt torn between anger at this betrayal and a strange form of understanding. She thought back to the past 2 weeks, the moments shared, the stories exchanged. And what did you discover? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Pierre turned to her, his eyes shining with an emotion that Elise had never seen before. I discovered that I was right. You are extraordinary, Elise. Your patience, your kindness, your strength. You exceeded all my expectations. Elise felt her cheeks redden despite herself. Part of her wanted to reject these compliments, to see them as an attempt at manipulation. But the sincerity in Pierre's voice was undeniable. I don't know what to say, she admitted. I'm lost. Part of me wants to scream at you, tell you how unfair and cruel it was. But another part. Understand? Pierre suggested gently. Elise nodded slowly. Maybe. I don't know. It's so unexpected. Pierre returned to sit on the bed, beckoning Elise to join him. After a moment of hesitation, she sat down next to him. Elise, he said, his voice laced with a new gravity, I know what I did is questionable. Maybe even unforgivable. But I want you to know that it wasn't out of malice. Or out of simple unhealthy curiosity I had. I have a reason. Elise raised an eyebrow, intrigued despite herself. A reason? Peter nodded. Yes. You see, for a while now, I've been thinking about the future. About the legacy I want to leave, not just to Thomas, but to our entire family. He got up and walked towards the dresser. Opening the top drawer, he took out a thick envelope. I have something prepared. Something that I hope will change all of our lives. But before I reveal it, I needed to be sure. Sure about what? Asked Elise, her eyes fixed on the mysterious envelope. Sure that the person my son chose to share his life with was trustworthy. Worthy of being a part of what I planned. He handed the envelope to Elise. And you are, Elise. Without a shadow of a doubt. With trembling hands, Elise took the envelope. She was about to open it when Pierre gently stopped her. Not now, he said with a smile. When Thomas and Margot come back. That's something we all have to figure out together. Elise put the envelope down, her mind swirling with questions. What could it contain? What was this grand plan that Peter had concocted? I know that's a lot to take in, Pierre said, noticing her troubled expression. And I would understand if you needed time, or even if you couldn't forgive me. Elise took a deep breath, trying to put her thoughts in order. I don't know how I feel, to be honest. It's so surreal. Pierre nodded, understanding. I know. And I'm sorry for putting you in this situation. But I want you to know that every moment we shared, every story I told you, it was real. The only thing that wasn't, it was my so-called illness. Elise looked at him, searching his eyes for a trace of duplicity, but finding only sincerity. I suppose, she said slowly, I can understand your motivation. Even if I don't approve of the method. A relieved smile lit up Pierre's face. It's more than I dared hope for, Elise. Thank you. A comfortable silence settled between them, each lost in their thoughts. Finally, Elise got up. Well, I guess I don't need to bring you your meals in bed anymore, she said with a chuckle. Pierre laughs in turn. No, indeed. How about we prepare breakfast together? I really want to get back to cooking. As they headed toward the kitchen, Elise felt a mix of emotions overcome her. There was still confusion, a touch of resentment, but also a strange excitement. Whatever this mysterious envelope contained, whatever Pierre had planned, she felt that their lives were about to change. In the sunny kitchen, Pierre began to take out the ingredients to prepare crepes, one of his favorite dishes that he had not been able to cook for weeks. Elise watched him work, still amazed by the transformation. So, she said, beating the dough, what are we going to do now? How are we going to explain all this to Thomas and Margot? Pierre poured a little oil into the pan, thoughtfully. I think it's better to wait for them to come back. This is the kind of thing that needs to be explained in person. Elise nodded, agreeing with this approach. And in the meantime, a mischievous smile appeared on Pierre's face. In the meantime, my dear Elise, how about we enjoy Paris a little? There are so many places that I would like to show you, stories that I would like to share with you in situ. The idea was tempting. Despite the initial deception, Elise could not deny that she had appreciated the moments shared with Pierre in recent weeks. The idea of exploring Paris with him, seeing the city through his eyes, was appealing. Okay, she finally said, a smile on her face. But on one condition. Which? Asked Pierre, curious. No more secrets, Elise replied firmly. No more tests. Just honesty. Pierre held out his hand, as if to seal a pact. You have my word, Elise. No more secrets. As they finished preparing breakfast, Elise felt a change coming over her. Initial anger and confusion gave way to growing curiosity. What adventures awaited them in the streets of Paris? And above all, what did this mysterious envelope contain? One thing was certain, the days to come promised to be anything but ordinary. The Parisian sun shone with a special brightness that morning, as if it too was celebrating the new beginning between Elise and Pierre. After their revealing conversation and shared breakfast, a new energy seemed to have filled the apartment. So where do we start? Asked Elise, still a little hesitant but undeniably curious. Pierre, who seemed to have looked 10 years younger since his miraculous cure, smiled mischievously. How about a little stroll in the Tuileries Gardens to start? It's a place steeped in history, and I have a few anecdotes that might interest you. Elise nodded, and soon they found themselves strolling through the well-kept paths of the famous garden. Pierre, walking with a confident step that contrasted sharply with his fragile appearance of the previous days, began to share his stories. See that big pool over there, he said, pointing. This is where I proposed to Margot. I had everything planned, the sunset, the flowers, even a violinist hiding behind a tree. But at the crucial moment, I tripped and fell into water. Elise burst out laughing, imagining the scene. And what did Margot do? She jumped into the water to join me, her beautiful dress and all, Pierre replied, his eyes shining with nostalgia. That's when I knew she was the one. Throughout the day, Pierre took Elise on a whirlwind of discoveries across Paris. Every street, every building seemed to have a story to tell. They visited small bookstores hidden in the Latin Quarter, where Pierre showed her the exact places where he and Margot used to hang out during their student years. But it wasn't just a sightseeing trip. At each stop, Pierre seemed to have a mysterious task to accomplish. In an old stationery store, he bought a thick leather notebook. At a jeweler in the Marais, he picked up a small, carefully wrapped package. Every time Elise tried to find out more, Pierre replied with an enigmatic wink, "All will be revealed in due time, my dear." The next few days followed a similar pattern. In the morning, they went on an adventure to a new neighborhood in Paris, Pierre sharing his memories and anecdotes. The afternoon was often devoted to mysterious tasks, telephone calls that Pierre made in secret, meetings with notaries or bankers to which Elise was not invited. Despite his promise to have no more secrets, Pierre seemed determined to maintain a veil of mystery over his activities. However, Elise noticed that it wasn't the same type of secret as before. There was a palpable excitement in the air, as if Pierre was planning a wonderful surprise. One evening, while they were dining in a small bistro in the 18th arrondissement, Elise couldn't help but ask the question that had been burning on her lips for days. "Pierre, I know you said everything would be revealed when Thomas and Margot return, but can you at least give me a hint as to what you're planning?" Pierre put down his fork and looked at Elise with a mixture of affection and malice. "Ah, curiosity. It's a quality that I really appreciate in you, Elise. Let's just say that what I'm preparing will change all of our lives. It's a project that's been close to my heart for a long time, but I wasn't sure I had the right people around me to make it happen." Elise frowned, intrigued. "And now, are you sure?" "More than ever," Pierre replied with a warm smile. "These last few days with you have only confirmed what I already suspected. You are exactly the person this family needs moving forward." These words touched Elise more than she wanted to admit. Since her marriage to Thomas, she had sometimes had the impression of being a stranger in the family, despite the kindness of Margot and Pierre. Hearing Pierre express such confidence in her was both comforting and a little frightening. The following days were filled with frenetic activity. Pierre seemed to have inexhaustible energy, leading Elise into a whirlwind of preparations whose purpose she did not fully understand. They visited real estate agencies, met with lawyers, and Pierre spent long hours on the phone, speaking in a mixture of French and English that left Elise perplexed. One afternoon, as they were walking along the Seine, Pierre suddenly stopped, watching the water flow with a pensive expression. "You know, Elise," he said softly, "when we get older, we start to think about what we're going to leave behind. Not just in material terms, but in terms of impact, memories, values." Elise nodded, encouraging Pierre to continue. "I've had a full life," he continued. "I experienced love with Margot, I saw my son grow up and become a good man. But I always wondered if I could do more, leave something bigger than myself." He turned to Elise, his eyes shining with an emotion she had never seen before. "This is what I am preparing, Elise. A legacy. Not only for Thomas, but for all of you. A way to ensure a future for you, but also to make a difference in the world." Elise felt her heart speed up. The magnitude of what Pierre was suggesting began to dawn on his mind. "Pierre, it's huge. Are you sure that?" Pierre interrupted him kindly. "I have never been so sure of anything in my life. And these last few days with you have only strengthened my conviction. You have a strength within you, Elise, a determination and a compassion that will be essential for what I have planned." The rest of the week passed like a dream. Elise felt torn between excitement about what was to come and a slight apprehension. What would Thomas and Margot say about all this? How would they react when they learned of Peter's deception? The day before Thomas and Margot returned, Pierre and Elise spent the evening preparing the apartment. They cleaned from top to bottom, arranged bouquets of fresh flowers, and Pierre even brought out a bottle of champagne that he had been saving for a special occasion. As they finished the preparations, Pierre took Elise by the shoulders, looking her straight in the eyes. "Elise, I know these last few weeks have been a whirlwind of emotions for you. I put you in a difficult situation, and I am infinitely grateful to you for being so understanding. Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know that I already consider you my own daughter." Elise's eyes filled with tears. Despite the initial deception, she could not deny the deep bond that had been created between her and Pierre. "Thank you, Pierre," she whispered. It means a lot to me. That night, as she prepared to sleep, Elise thought about everything that had happened since Thomas and Margot left. What started as a simple responsibility to care for a sick father-in-law had turned into an adventure she could never have imagined. She had discovered a strength within herself she never knew she had, created an unexpected bond with Pierre, and now stood on the edge of something that promised to change their lives all. Tomorrow, Thomas and Margot would return. Tomorrow all the secrets would be revealed. Tomorrow their lives would take a new turn. As she closed her eyes, Elise found herself looking forward to tomorrow with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. No matter what happened, she knew one thing for sure: nothing would ever be the same again. Sleep slowly overtook her, lulled by the familiar noise of the city below and the regular ticking of the living room clock. Tomorrow would be a new chapter, and Elise was ready to turn the page. The long-awaited day had finally arrived. Elise woke up at the first light of dawn, her heart pounding with anticipation. She glanced at her phone, a message from Thomas informing her that they had landed and would be home in a few hours. The reality of the situation suddenly hit her hard. How were they going to explain everything that had happened? She found Pierre already standing in the kitchen, preparing an elaborate breakfast. "Hello, Elise," he said with a warm smile. "Ready for the big day?" Elise nodded, uncertain. "I think so. And you?" Pierre put down the coffee pot and looked at Elise seriously. "I know it won't be easy. They will probably be angry at first, maybe even hurt. But I sincerely believe that what we have to tell them, what we have prepared, will more than make up for this difficult time." The next few hours passed in a blur of activity. They made sure the apartment was spotless, checked one last time the mysterious documents Pierre had prepared, and tried to calm their nerves with cups of tea. Finally, the long-awaited sound of keys in the lock was heard. Elise and Pierre exchanged one last look before heading towards the entrance. The door opened, revealing Thomas and Margot, tanned and smiling, loaded with suitcases and souvenir bags. For a brief moment, everything seemed normal. Then Margot's gaze fell on Pierre, standing upright and in great shape, and her smile froze. "Rock," she whispered, incredulous. "What? How?" Thomas, who was dropping off his luggage, turned around abruptly at his mother's voice. His eyes widened when he saw his father. "Dad! What's going on here?" The silence that followed was deafening. Elise felt the weight of all eyes falling on her, waiting for an explanation. She opened her mouth to speak, but Pierre beat her to it. "Thomas, Margot," he said in a calm but firm voice, "I know you must be shocked. Please come in and sit down. We have a lot to tell you." As if in a dream, the family headed towards the living room. Thomas and Margot sat on the couch, their faces a mix of confusion and worry. Elise took a seat in an armchair, while Pierre remained standing, as if ready to make a presentation. "First of all," Pierre began, "I want to apologize. What I did, what we did, may seem cruel or unfair to you. But I ask you to listen to the end before carrying a judgment." And thus, Pierre began to tell the story of the past 2 weeks. He explained his plan, his motivations, how he wanted to test the loyalty and the strength of character of Elise. As he spoke, the expressions of Thomas and Margot moved from confusion to disbelief, then to increasing anger. "How could you do that?" finally exploded Thomas, rising suddenly. "Make us believe that you were sick, send us on vacation while you... What? Played games with Elise?" Margot, tears in his eyes, turned to Elise. "And you? Did you participate in all of this?" Elise felt her heart tighten. "No, I didn't know anything until a few days ago. I was as surprised as you are now." Pierre raised his hands in a soothing gesture. "Please let me finish. I know what I did is difficult to understand, but there is a reason for all of this." Slowly, patiently, Pierre continued his explanation. He spoke of his desire to make sure that the family was in good hands, his need to know that Elise was really devoted to the family, not only to Thomas. He told the moments shared with Elise, deep conversations, mutual discoveries. As Pierre spoke, Thomas and Margot's initial anger began to fade, replaced by a prudent curiosity. They were now listening with attention, throwing eyes from time to Elise from time to time, as if to confirm what Pierre said. "But why all this mystery?" finally asked Margot, his voice softer than before. Why not just tell us about it? Pierre sighed, finally sitting. Because what I planned, what I want to do, required absolute certainty. It is not a decision to be taken lightly. He leaned forward, looking each of them in the eyes. For years, I have thought about our family inheritance. Not only money or goods, but the values, the principles that define us. I wanted to create something that would perpetuate these values, which would make a real difference in the world. Thomas frowned. What are you talking about exactly, Dad? Peter got up and went to seek the mysterious envelope he had prepared. He put it on the coffee table in front of them. I have created a foundation. A family foundation that will be dedicated to causes that are important to us: education, the environment, help with the poorest. But for it to work, I needed to know that we were all on the same wavelength, that we shared the same values. An amazed silence fell on the room. Thomas and Margot fixed the envelope as if it contained all the secrets of the universe. Elise, although she knew that he was preparing for something important, was also stunned by the extent of the revelation. A foundation, whispered Thomas. But how? With what funds? Pierre had a little smile. I have made some judicious investments over the years. And I sold the company 6 months ago. This new information had the effect of a bomb. The family business had been the pillar of their lives for decades. Selling it seemed unthinkable. But why didn't you tell us anything? Asked Margot, her trembling voice. Because I wanted you to have the choice, replied Pierre. I wanted you to decide to participate in this project not by obligation or in expectation, but because you really wanted it. And for that, I needed to know who you were really, deep in yourself. He turned to Elise. This is where Elise comes into play. Observing how she took care of me, how she reacted to adversity, I saw the person she was really. And I knew she would be an invaluable asset for this foundation, for our family. Elise felt tears getting her eyes. Peter's words, the confidence he placed in her, were overwhelming. Thomas got up slowly, approaching his father. Dad, I don't know what to say. It's so unexpected. Pierre put a hand on his son's shoulder. I know it's a lot to assimilate. And I would understand if you were angry with me, if you needed time to digest all this. But I want you to know that everything I did out of love for this family, for all of you. Margot raised herself in turn, joining her husband and son. Pierre, you always surprised us. But that's beyond everything I could have imagined. For a long time, the family stayed there, close to each other, absorbing the enormity of what had just been revealed. Elise observed the scene, feeling both an integral part and slightly outside this family moment. Finally, Thomas turned to her. Elise, I'm sorry. You have to go through so many things in the past 2 weeks. Elise shook her head, a little smile. Don't apologize. It was an experience, unique. And despite everything, I would not change it for anything in the world. Pierre clears his throat. There is still a lot to be discussed, a lot of details to settle. But for the moment, what would you say to sit and talk to us? Thomas, Margot, tell us about your trip. Elise and I can't wait to hear your adventures in Hawaii. And thus, the family settled in the living room, the atmosphere oscillating between the excitement of travel accounts and the anticipation of what the future reserved for them. The envelope on the coffee table seemed to vibrate with possibilities, a promise of a new chapter in their family history. While the conversation flooded, passing from vacation anecdotes to questions on the foundation, Elise could not help thinking how much her life had changed in just 2 weeks. What had started as a simple task of taking care of his stepfather had turned into an adventure that was going to redefine not only his place in the family, but potentially the future of their whole family. She met the eyes of Peter, which made her discreet wink. Despite all the challenges to come, Elise felt ready. Ready to be part of something larger than it itself, ready to contribute to an inheritance that would go beyond generations. The future was uncertain, but for the first time for a long time, it seemed filled with infinite promises and possibilities. The afternoon sun was bathing the living room with a soft golden light, creating an almost unreal atmosphere. The family, gathered around the coffee table, stared at the mysterious envelope that Pierre had placed in front of them. The air was charged with anticipation, mixed with a slight apprehension. Pierre took a deep inspiration, his eyes sweeping the faces of his loved ones. "I think it's time to reveal all the details," he said slowly. "Are you ready?" Thomas and Margot exchanged a look, then nodded in silence. Elise, sitting a little back, felt her heart accelerating. Even if she had witnessed Pierre's preparations in recent days, she had only a vague idea of what the envelope really contained. With slow and deliberate gestures, Pierre opened the envelope and released a bundle of documents. "As I told you, I created a family foundation. But it is not a simple charity. It is the fruit of years of reflection, planning and, I hope, of wisdom accumulated over time." He spread the documents on the table. There were notarial acts, detailed plans, financial projections, and even some photographs. Thomas leaned forward, his eyes quickly traveling the papers. "Dad," he whispered, it's huge. These figures. How is it possible?" Pierre had a little smile. "As I told you, I made some wise investments. But more importantly, I had a vision. A vision of what our family could accomplish if we united our forces for a common goal." He took one of the photographs and handed it to Margot. It was the image of a magnificent property by the sea, with a large colonial house and palm trees in the breeze. "It was in Hawaii," explained Pierre. "More specifically on the island of Maui. I bought this property 6 months ago, just after sold the business. It will be the headquarters of our foundation, but also a gathering place for our family." Margot brought a hand to her mouth, eyes wide. "Is that why you sent us there? To discover the island?" Pierre nodded. "Partly, yes. I wanted you to fall in love with the place, as I did. But I also wanted you to have an overview of the local culture, the challenges that the island is confronted, of the opportunities that are there." He turned to Elise, who listened carefully. "And during this time, I could see how devoted, compassionate and intelligent." Elise felt her cheeks blush under the compliment, but she could not help asking, "But Pierre, what exactly did you plan? What is the mission of this foundation?" Peter straightened up, his illuminating face of an obvious passion. "Our mission will be triple. First, the preservation of the Hawaiian environment and culture. The island faces many ecological challenges, and traditional culture is threatened by mass tourism. We will work in close collaboration with the local communities to protect and restore ecosystems, while supporting cultural initiatives." He pointed to another document. "Second, education. We will create scholarships for local students, emphasizing environmental, culture and sustainable development areas. We will also finance research programs on marine biodiversity and terrestrial of the island." Thomas, who had listened carefully, intervened. "And the third aspect?" Pierre smiles. "Community development. We will invest in local projects, small businesses that align with our values. The idea is to create a model of economic development which is in harmony with the environment and the local culture." Silence fell on the room when everyone digested the extent of what Pierre had just revealed. It was not only a foundation, it was a life project, a heritage that would extend over generations. Margot was the first to break the silence. "Pierre, it's beautiful. But how are we going to manage all this? We have no experience in the management of a foundation." Pierre nodded, recognizing the relevance of the question. "This is where you all intervene. I set up the structure, I provided the initial funds, but it's up to you to give life to this vision." He turned to Thomas. "Thomas, with your business management experience, you will be perfect for supervising the financial and administrative aspects of the foundation." Then towards Margot, "Margot, your passion for education and your creativity will be essential to develop our educational and cultural programs." Finally, he looked at Elise. "And you, Elise. Your compassion, your dedication, and your ability to connect with people will make you a perfect connection with local communities. You will be our ambassador on the ground." Elise felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension get in her. It was a huge responsibility, but also an incredible opportunity. Thomas got up and began to make 100 steps, his mind turning at full speed. "Does that mean that we should move to Hawaii? Abandon our lives here in Paris?" Pierre shook his head. Not necessarily. The idea is that we spent several months a year there, in rotation. The rest of the time, we can manage things from a distance, with the help of a local team that we will recruit. Margot, who had been silent for a while, finally spoke. It's an incredible chance that you offer us, Pierre. A chance to really make a difference in the world. She paused, her eyes brilliant with emotion. But it's also scary. It's a big change. Pierre got up and approached his wife, taking his hands in hers. I know that it is a lot to assimilate. And I do not expect you to make a decision immediately. Take the time to think about it, to ask all your questions. This foundation is a gift, not an obligation. Elise, who had been silent so far, felt the need to express himself. I know that I am the last arrival in this family. But these last 2 weeks have made me realize how much you count for me. If you decide to go ahead with this project, I will be honored to be part of it. Thomas approached her and took her hand. You are not the last arrival, Elise. You are an essential part of this family. And after what Papa told us, I know that we could not do this without you. The atmosphere in the room changed subtly. What had started as a shocking revelation slowly turned into an exciting opportunity, a new chapter in their family history. Pierre returned to sit down, a satisfied smile on his face. I have one last surprise for you, he said, coming out a last envelope from his pocket. I have reserved tickets for all of us. We leave for Hawaii in 2 weeks. I think it is time that we all visit our new property together, that we meet the people with whom we are going to work, that we see our own eyes the potential of what we can do. Margot's eyes lit up. Oh, Pierre, it's wonderful. Thomas, Elise, you will love the island. It's really a magical place. While the conversation came alive, each sharing their ideas and hopes for this new project, Elise could not help feeling a deep gratitude. Barely 2 weeks ago, she felt a little away, uncertain of her place in this family. And now she was at the heart of a project that promised not only to unite them even more, but also to make a real difference in the world. The evening continued late at night, filled with lively discussions, enthusiastic projects, and shared dreams. While the sun was going to bed in Paris, illuminating the sky with orange and pink shades, the Durand family was standing at the threshold of a new adventure, ready to embrace a future filled with promises and challenges. Pierre, observing his family with a mixture of pride and love, knew that his bet had paid. What he had initiated as a test had turned into something much bigger, an opportunity to leave a lasting heritage, not only for his family, but for an entire community on the other side of the world. While the night fell on the city of the Enlightenment, a new dawn rose for the Durand family, promising days filled with purposes, love and adventure under the Hawaii sun. The 2 weeks following Pierre's great revelation passed like a whirlwind for the Durand family. The Parisian apartment, formerly a haven of tranquility, had turned into a frantic activity center. Piles of documents piled up on the living room table, incessant phone calls resounded at any time, and the palpable excitement in the air was almost electric. Elise, who initially felt a touch of apprehension in the face of the magnitude of the project, surprised himself to dive head first in preparations. Each evening, it remained awake late, absorbed by research on Hawaiian culture, the ecology of the islands, and the challenges faced by local communities. Her determination to be up to the confidence that Pierre had placed in her was obvious to all. Thomas, on the other hand, spent his days to juggle between the management of his current business and the planning of their new project. His analytical spirit found a new stimulating challenge in the creation of the organizational structure of the foundation. Often, late at night, you could find him leaning on his computer, developing financial plans and sustainable development strategies. Margot, revitalized by this new adventure, had shown her old travel diaries. She spent hours sketching ideas for educational programs, imagining creative ways to mix traditional Hawaiian culture with modern teaching methods. His enthusiasm was contagious, instilling a positive energy with the whole family in moments of doubt. Pierre, for his part, observed all this with a mixture of pride and wonder. Seeing their family unite so, each bringing their unique skills to the project, exceeded their wildest expectations. He spent his days making calls, organizing meetings, ensuring that all legal and logistical aspects were in order for their big departure. One evening, when the family was gathered around the dining table, sharing a simple but friendly meal, Elise asked the question that has been burning her lips for days. "Pierre," she started slowly, "I know you said that this foundation was a gift for us, so that we can leave our brand. But I wonder, what has you really pushed to do all of this?" A silence settled around the table, all the eyes turning to Pierre. He put his fork, his gaze becoming distant, as if he returned to a distant memory. "Years ago," he started, "long before Thomas were born, Margot and I made a trip to Hawaii. It was supposed to be simple holidays, but it turned out to be much more than that." Margot took the hand of her husband, a sweet smile on his lips, encouraging her to continue. "We met an old kahuna, a traditional Hawaiian priest," continued Pierre. "He told us about the concept of mlama, which means taking care, protecting. He told us that each generation has the responsibility of taking care of the earth, culture, people, for future generations." Pierre took a break, his eyes sweeping away the attentive faces around the table. "These words haunted me for years. I succeeded in business, I built a good life for us, but I always felt that something was missing. It was only recently that I have including what it was. I wanted to leave an inheritance that would embody this concept of mlama." Elise felt her eyes humidified. The depth of Stone's reflection, the magnitude of his vision, touched her more than she would have imagined. Thomas, visibly moved too, spoke. "Dad, I don't know what to say. It's so much bigger than all that I could have imagined." Pierre smiled at his son. "It's big, yes. But it's as simple. It is about taking care of each other, our planet, our cultural heritage. And I cannot think of anyone else with whom I would like undertake this adventure." The following days were filled with the latest frantic preparations. Suitcases to make, last calls to make, farewell to friends and the extended family. But in the midst of all this agitation, there was a feeling of purposes, a certainty that what they were about to do was just and important. The day before their departure, while the sun was sleeping in Paris, the family gathered one last time in the living room. The apartment, half emptied of their belongings, seemed strangely large and silent. Margot, still practical, had prepared a list of latest checks. "Passports? Check," they replied in chorus. "Plane tickets? Check. Foundation files? All scanned and saved in triple exemplary," confirmed Thomas with a smile. Elise, sitting near the window, looked at the city's lights on one by one. A wave of nostalgia suddenly overwhelmed her. "I will miss it," she whispered. "Paris, our life here." Thomas approached her, passing an arm around her shoulders. "To me too. But thinks of everything that awaits us. This is the beginning of a new adventure." Pierre, who had listened in silence, spoke. "You know, there is a Hawaiian proverb who says, 'Aohi hana nui ku alu ia.' It means no task is too big when we do it together. This is what we are on the point of proving." The departure morning finally arrived. The journey to the airport was made in a mixture of excitement and apprehension. As they were waiting for boarding, everyone seemed lost in their thoughts. Elise, looking by the big picture window of the airport, felt a hand resting gently on her shoulder. It was Margot. "You know," said the older woman with a warm smile, "when Pierre told me for the first time about her idea of testing your loyalty, I was skeptical. I thought it was one of his crazy ideas that he would get bored. But now I see wisdom behind." Elise turned to her mother-in-law, surprised. "Really?" Margot nodded. "Yes. It was not only about you, you know. It was also a test for all of us. To see if we were ready to embrace such a radical change, to engage in something bigger than me." Margot's words deeply resonated in Elise. She suddenly realized that this trip was not only a geographical displacement, but an inner journey for each of them. The call for their flight sounds, pulling them from their conversation. As they headed for the boarding gate, Pierre stopped suddenly. "Wait," he said, coming out his phone. "A last family photo before our big departure." They gathered, smiles on the lips, the excitement of the adventure to come brilliant in their eyes. The click of the camera captured this moment, freezing the start of their new life over time. As they climbed aboard the plane, Elise felt a wave of emotions overwhelm her. Fear, excitement, anticipation, everything mixed in it. But above all, there was a feeling of gratitude. Gratitude for this family who had welcomed her, for this incredible opportunity, for this chance of making a real difference in the world. The plane takes off, rising above Paris, the city of lights gradually moving under them. Elise looked by the porthole, seeing France, her native country, disappear in the morning mist. But rather than sadness, she felt a strange peace. She knew that they were carrying with them the essence of their Parisian life, their values, their memories, and that they were going to mix them with the richness of Hawaiian culture to create something unique and beautiful. Thomas, seated next to her, took her hand and sank it gently. No words were necessary. They both knew that they were at the start of an extraordinary trip, not only through the ocean, but through life. Pierre, on the other side of the aisle, looked at his family with pride. His plan, born from a desire to test the loyalty of Elise, had evolved into something much greater. He had united his family in a way that he would never have thought possible, giving them a common goal, a shared mission. While the plane took altitude, heading west and their new life, each of the Durand felt that they were at the dawn of a new chapter. A chapter filled with challenges, of course, but also infinite opportunities. A chapter where they could really embody the concept of mlama, taking care not only of each other, but also of an entire community, of a rich culture, of a precious environment. The horizon stretched in front of them, vast and full of promises. And while the plane was spinning to Hawaii, the Durand family was ready to embrace their new beginning, together, united in their quest for an inheritance that would go beyond generations.